Speaking of digital and how accessible that is, everyone's got a camera on their phone. Do you
Mm.
think another way to differentiate yourself and go to a low competition area is to actually shoot analog and then create amazing prints? That's a way to increase the value of your work.
If you want to increase the value of the work, you need people on your side. You need to have a certain amount of business acumen. And a lot of the most creative people in the world are not very sociable, can be quite withdrawn, can have certain types of ADHD issues. And I'm not saying this in a negative sense. I'm saying that this is what gives them their incredible creativity, but it makes it harder for them to promote themselves. And it's so often the case. I think I can also be quite bad at promoting myself when I'm in a real creative mode. So shooting analog can only be part of it. You've really got to be able to have people on your side, people who will promote you, people who will support you in order to give you those openings. But I think the most important thing is to create great work. And if you can create great work and then find inroads from there, that's what you can send people emails, but people get a million emails a day. Not a million, but maybe some do. And they can't physically process at the galleries. So how else can you get to be seen? But like music and acting and so on, very talented people around, brilliant people. But there's only a small number who can get to those who will enable them to make a good living.
Like, how do people starting off make great work, but also learn those business skills and those branding skills that'll potentially get them into galleries? What are some key tips for that?
As I said, I think the first thing is to produce great work and not in huge volume and to be different. Be yourself. Don't look at another person and say, I love that person, but I'm going to try and produce work like theirs. If yours stands out and resonates with people, well, also the prints have got to be beautiful quality. And I think so often now with modern technology, it's easy to just press print on the inkjet printer. I think learning about the works of people like Ansel Adams, who was a master printmaker. You look at pictures by Eugene Smith or Irving Penn. Irving Penn is somebody who I often cite as a wonderful example because he was a great fashion photographer, but he took photographs of cigarette ends, which, in fact, at the moment, Hamilton's Gallery have got someone's show. And he produced platinum palladium prints with them. But as far as I'm aware, he didn't just put the negative on the paper. He multiple exposed them. He would coat it and expose and coat it. So he built up a depth. Now, those are some of the most exquisite prints I have ever seen. They are mind-blowing. And the subject matter, cigarette stubs. But they're beautiful. And I think that is an incredible achievement to take the most mundane, ordinary, boring subject and make it into something so beautiful that people covet it and want it on the wall. That's the way. No one's pretending it's easy. And also have your own sort of unique stamp on your work that's identifiable as yours. That somebody can look at that and say, you look at Bill Brandt and you have those shadows. Immediately it's a Bill Brandt image. And that's photography. And that's good people can be at the same thing and take photographs and they'll be different.
Do you
Yeah.
think that's still a good way to brand yourself and get your
Absolutely.
photos to more people?
Absolutely. But it's also very challenging because they are the mainstream book publishers. And I've had 15 books published in 22 languages. I was there at the right time. I know it's much, much harder now. And then don't think of books as a money-making thing, but as a calling card, as advertising. And it's extremely successful in that regard. But publishing a book alone isn't the hard part. The hard part is finding somebody who can get it translated into other languages or getting it distributed. Now, all the top publishers have distribution challenges. And it's a very expensive process because just the warehousing, the storage, if a book doesn't sell, it sits in a warehouse and you have to pay rent to the warehouse. And for the publishers, they have to pay the salespeople, they have to try and get them to get a book in the window, Waterstones. It's not that easy because there are thousands and thousands of books. And one book publisher is publishing 150 books a year, which is what and then there are hundreds of book publishers. How many can fit in Waterstone's window? How many will get onto the shelves of Waterstones? And it's not just Waterstones. There's Amazon and other bookshops, and there's so many thousands. How do you get it high up on the search engines? These are all difficult challenges, and I think from a book point of view, you really need to. You can self-publish, you can kickstart. I know people who've done very well with Kickstarter or crowdfunding programs, and so they market them beforehand. They sell a lot beforehand. But these are all challenges. But I would say, just don't go and throw all your money at self-publishing something, and then you've got a couple of thousand books delivered to you, and you think, how am I going to get these out to an audience? It's a program of events, and you've got to plan ahead all these other things if you're going into books.
And how do you approach publishers and distributors when you have an idea for a book? What are some tips for that?
The tip is to have a very clear proposal, a clear idea, and the publisher's going to want to know what sets it apart from something else. They're going to want to know why you think they are the right publisher for it. They're going to want to know what the competition is. They're going to want to know what similar books have been published and how you'll fit in with that and how you'll complement that. And then they're going to want to know the unique selling points. And you have to say it's going to reach this audience, and it might be of interest to students and people in conservation. And then you need to have a very clear biography of it. You need to let them know what you'll do. I think what's important now is the photographer's own social media presence, because the publisher's going to want to know how you will be able to help them with regard to getting the word out. There wasn't social media like there is now when I was having my books published.
I guess that makes it easier, but also harder, because you have to put in effort to grow your social media. But once your social media is a large enough number, that will attract publishers. But it's just that first step.
Exactly. I saw an interesting guy on Instagram who's got a huge number of followers, and he's a wildlife photographer, and someone films him making the photograph, and then you see the photograph. And I think that is his business model as a wildlife photographer, rather than so many people on Instagram seems that he's an influencer and makes a living through the sheer hundreds of thousands of people who see his, if not millions, who see his posts. I'm in my 70s now. That's ahead of me. And I look at that with my eyes wide open saying, it's amazing that there are ways in which people are sustaining themselves that you could never have dreamt of 20 or 30 years ago.
Definitely. And I think growing that, and maybe also combining that with fine art, because you have a reputation from social media, that might be difficult to do. But if you can merge both of them things together, like a few photographers are doing, that's ideal. You were saying earlier about having a minimum amount of photos, keep it small, less is more for quality of your work. How many photos do you need in a book compared to in a fine art gallery or to show to a gallery?
Okay, the biggest book I did, which came out in 2004, was called Untamed, and that was in 10 languages, and that was really big. It weighed 4.5 kilos, 240 pictures in that, and over 400 pages with double-page spreads. That's the most I've had in a single book, but it depends on the text, it depends on the layout. Good design is very important. And just keep them with strong pictures. So I would say 100, 120. There's no clear answer to it. For a book, 40 or 50 pictures is probably too few. But then again, if it's nicely laid out, if you've got lots of pictures on the page, it can be a bit crowded. But if it's nicely spread out and laid out, it could look quite good. Design is important. Good book design is so important. The Tate Gallery holds an annual event called Out, which I went to last week, and it was absolutely packed. These are alternative publishers and alternative art books and everything. I just found, from a personal point of view, I wish them all well. I just found myself completely and utterly overwhelmed with volume, and there were very few gems among them that I saw. The rest was just volumes of self-indulgent stuff, and I don't think that's going to stand the test of time.